Okay, I think we got it. So, welcome everybody. It is the third Saturday of the month. And on the third Saturday of the month, we are, like every Saturday, we do a little study group in the afternoon here. For this one, I'm very pleased to be joined by Sky Matsuhashi from the Poker Forge. Sky's been sharing a little more of his time with Rec.Poker Nation lately. We're going to be releasing a new premium strategy video just for Rec.Poker folks that normally you'd only be able to see at the Poker Forge. That's going to come out early in the month. And then later in the month on the third Saturday, Sky will be joining us here to do a little Q&A and to review the material. So I'm excited to have him here. The first video that we looked at was all about bread and butter spots. And it's such a good place to start thinking about where can we find some of those higher EV spots? Where can we wrest some chips from the other people at the table without even necessarily having a stronger hand than they do? This is one of those spots where we can set up a table dynamic where we're just going to profit more from it than in others. So I know probably not everyone had a chance to watch the video all the way through. I hope a lot of people did. So one of the things that Sky always does is he introduces some action steps for people to take and to kind of internalize that themselves, which I think is really important. So before I get into sort of some of that, why don't we just start? Does anyone have any questions for Sky, or did they enjoy anything from the video, or did they not get anything from the video, or what are people's thoughts right off the bat? And just jump in there, of course. So people absorbed it perfectly. Yeah,
noticed,
take it, Rob.
You know, most of us are MTT players, and this was a live session that he was, or two sessions that he was in. So it's there might be some differences there based on stack sizes and whatnot.
Yeah, there might be, but basically bread and butter poker is being the pre-flop raiser in position against one or two other players. And generally, whether it's tournament, cash game, sit and goes, whatever, that's just the best spot to be in, right? Your opponent has that informational disadvantage. They have to worry about what you're going to do on the next two streets if they continue beyond the flop. And so, yes, stack considerations. I mean, you open raise going for that bread and butter and somebody 3-bet shoves with the 12 big blind stack. Yeah, that's not addressed in bread and butter, but that's just one of those tournament implications that outside of cash games, that doesn't really, that's something that you have to consider and learn to play with as, you know, as a tournament player. But in the early stages and the mid stages, when everybody has 50 big blinds or more, up to 200, 300 big blinds, then it's kind of like a cash game, and bread and butter poker is what you want to strive for, putting your opponents in those tough spots and earning their chips.
And also avoiding the situation where you're letting other people get into bread and butter situations against you, right? Mm-hmm. So once you kind of recognize that this is a powerful dynamic that people can be in, you're also going to understand that it's not something you want to be on the other side of very often. And that'll apply in both. So one of the things, the sort of what is a bread and butter spot? And as Sky points out in the video a bit, making the last raise pre-flop, being in position on the flop and facing one or two foes. And that's really just a great position to be in. It's a position where you're going to have position, you're going to have range advantage, you're going to be able to range your opponents with some ease, given that it's not that multi-way. And so it's just a way to sort of up your win rate in those spots. I noticed in the forums today, Dan W, who couldn't join us because he's playing, he satellited into the Canterbury main event today, so he's playing there. But he had a question. Sky, is there a sort of like a proportion or a ratio of bread and butter spots to non-bread and butter spots? Because I know we should just try and be in as many as possible. But when you review your hands, is there sort of like a 2-to-1, or is there a way that it sort of falls down when you're doing it yourself?
So it does depend on the stakes that you play, 6 max full ring, because bread and butter, a key aspect is being in position. When you raise under the gun or in the MP and you still have 4 players, you know, from the button, the cutoff, the hijack in the MP, still to act, you can't really control whether or not they call. But a good number to strive for is 45% being in position on the flop, as the pre-flop raiser. Now, what I would recommend is, you know, if you're an online player, you have a database of Poker Tracker for Hands or Hold'em Manager, you can go through and then filter for seeing the flop in position as the pre-flop raiser. And maybe for the past month or 10,000 hands, calculate your current percentage, whatever that is. Maybe you find that you're in the bread and butter spot 32% of the time. Well, over the next week, over the next month, let's strive for 35, 36, continually up that percentage and strive for that. But like I said, 45 is a really good target to go for. And you really can't control it sometimes. If you got a lot of fishy players who love calling in the cutoff and button, you're going to be out of position quite often. You might still be the pre-flop raiser with that stronger range, but not necessarily in position. So you can't 100% control it. One thing you could do to help to control that number to get you more bread and butter spots is to call less in marginal spots from the blinds.
And I guess you could raise your sizing. You could raise your open sizing when you were in earlier position to decrease the number of calls that you were going to get. But that probably has a knock-on effect that we don't really want to get into, where now we'd have to play a much tighter range to make that profitable. And so I think part of it's just, you're not going to play every hand in a bread and butter spot, but that with the hands that you can take to that action, it's just a better way to do it. I had one question, just selfishly going to jump in here before the rest of the crew has a chance. So you talked a little bit about how you might end up in a non-bread and butter situation by opening from early position or by calling from the blinds. And I think we should still do that sometimes. What are the kind of hand qualities that we might choose to play out of a bread and butter position, or what other circumstances about the hand might make us decide that we're actually going to play this not in a bread and butter spot?
Some of the things would be, we could talk about the hand in just a sec, but one important aspect, and I don't think I mentioned it in any of the 3 videos for today's discussion, it's that every time you enter the pot as the pre-flop raiser or the caller or the 3-better or whatever, you're targeting a specific player. So if you're considering calling out of the big blind, let's leave your hand out of the equation right now. You're calling somebody who open raised in the cutoff. Is he a good player to target, to purposely get into this post flop situation against when you're out of position? That's the number one thing. Let's say it's the best player at the table. You know, we've got Jim here in the cutoff. He open raised it against me in the big blind. Should I really call Jim with the 10-7 suited and give him position, give him that bread and butter spot right there? Jim would say, yes, please call with your 10-7 suited, right? But should I do that? Should I give the best player at the table a bread and butter spot against me? And if you hate the idea of giving Jim bread and butter, just fold your hand. Now, sometimes the hand itself you'll want to play. Pocket deuces, you want to set mine. If Jim only open raises 2.5 big blinds, cost you 1.5 more. Yes, let's open raise and take on the best player at the table. So small and medium. So let's talk, we can first think about 2-bet pots. 3-betting is a little bit different because it's a bigger bet size. You don't necessarily want to set mine or play some suited connectors and stuff, but great hands to go post flop out of position. Suited connectors like 6-5 suited, 10-jack suited, suited gappers like Jack-9, Queen-10 suited are good too. Any suited Broadway actually is pretty good. Suited aces and small and medium pocket pairs are good. The other thing you want to look out for is when it comes to your opponent, and like Rob's question or comment earlier about tournaments and stuff, you really want to be careful. If you're playing a hand like 10-9 suited pre-flop or 10-8 suited, you're gonna have to think to yourself, there's a very good chance I'm gonna miss this flop. I might hit flush draw, might hit a straight draw, but I'm gonna miss. If I'm gonna win this pot at some point, I'm probably gonna have to bluff. And what kind of opponent are you up against is the first consideration, but in tournaments, stack size is important. If he open races a 3 big blinds, he only has 20 big blinds behind. If one other person calls and you call, that pot's already 10 big blinds. He started with 20, he's only got 17. How are you going to possibly push him off post flop with your 10-8, your Jack-9 suited? So that's another consideration, stack size as well, especially for tournaments, but it applies to cash games too.
Yeah, I like that. You really have to have a plan for later in the hand, especially when stack sizes get small. And that's something we come up to against all the time, I think, as recreational tournament players too, where we get to the turn or something and we're like, oh, damn, I don't even have a pot size bet left here. So I hope my range is entirely value because that's the only way we're going to actually play this hand the best. No, I think that's a great point. One of the comments in the forums that I was looking at earlier this week is from Eric Jen, who just joined the group here. So Eric, you talked about how you were keeping track with a tick sheet, and this is awesome. This is one of the things that Sky talks about all the time, which is just having something that you're paying attention to during your playing session, and just taking a little tick sheet where you're recording, was it this kind of spot or was it that kind of spot? Eric, you said in your forum post that you were playing in a pretty aggressive table with a player to your left who was 3-betting a lot. So you anticipated not being in as many bread and butter spots. And I think it came out to something like 6 to 16, I think was the ratio there. And then Eric, do you recall what kind of hands you chose to either take that with or not to take that with, or the as you were ticking along? Was there anything that kind of illustrated to you? Oh, you're muted just at the moment.
Yeah, so I was playing 6 max on Ignition, and I have a very well-defined pre-flop range that I know to open, 3-bet, respond to 3 bets. So I'm pretty disciplined about just following along, unless I have, some obvious reads, but I just follow along. So I was Ignition, anonymous, and I sat down, had a limp in front of me, so I ISO raised to 4, and this guy just 3-bet me. And I had I think ace queen suited, which is in my flatting range, out of position. I flatted, missed the flop, and he took it down. And then another time, I had I had something in my like a king queen offsuit. I ISO raise, same limper, ISO raise, same 3-better, but that's in my not continue range, so I had to fold that. So in one case I folded, didn't see a flop, and the other case I did see a flop, but I was out of position and I wasn't the last aggressor, so that I wasn't in the bread and butter spot, but it was a hand that I was willing to see a flop with.
Yeah, and there's spots
absolutely.
where you are trying to isolate too. So you're trying to get that bread and butter spot, and then someone behind you is making that. Sorry, Sky, what were you saying there?
No, that's fine. So let me ask you a question, Eric. Those 2 instances when you ISO raise, you said the first one you made it 4 big blinds. What was the size on the second? Same. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd recommend, 2 things right now for you, is start to go bigger with your ISO raises. When somebody limps in, that's automatic. It's your very first hand of the table, maybe. And somebody limps in, you automatically target them as a fish. Like, they might be totally slow playing with pocket aces trying to suck you in, but most likely Ignition poker limpers are fish. You want that fish heads up to yourself. You want to be in the bread and butter spot against them. So I would recommend ISO raising, especially with a hand like ace queen, ace king, ace jack, ace 10 suited, ace 5 suited, pocket 9s. Make it 5 or 6 big blinds. Make it a little bit more costly for the 3-betters to come in and bluff you, for one thing. And you also, when you make it bigger like that, you make it more likely a fishy player is going to call. Like, if you ever think for yourself, have you ever called 5 or 6 big blinds cold with a pocket pair of 4s or 6s or 10 jack suited? You might have, but most likely you don't, right? You limit the calls, you get the stronger players out who think, oh, that bet's too big for me to be calling. And then you get that fishy limper, or maybe someone else out of the blinds who's willing to call right there. So the first thing I'd recommend that you make your ISO raises a little bit bigger, because everyone's used to 4 big blinds, you making it 4. So if they want a 3-bet bluff, he makes it 4. Everybody makes it 4. I could just make it 10 big blinds right now. And so you make it easier for the bluffers to execute against you. And another thing, I've been teaching my audience through one of my free courses that the new guy at the table, you can exploit him. Even if he comes in for an ISO raise, it's very likely he doesn't, well, not likely, he just sat at the table. He doesn't know any of these other players here. When Eric comes in, unknown, player 1, ISO raises, me on the big blind, or me on the button right now, I don't know anything about him. He could be doing this as a bluff or anything. I'm going to put him to the test. I have the best spot. I'm going to try to put myself in a bread and butter situation against him. And so that's possibly what he's doing. When you make it bigger, those aggressive players, even though they don't know anything about you, they're going to be less likely to 3-bet bluff you.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting.
But then you can
option.
use the opposite tact, right? Somebody's new at your table and they come in for a 4 big blind ISO raise, and you're on the button. What a great spot to put yourself in a bread and butter situation and 3-bet him with anything. Like, I played a session the other day for my Poker Forge group, and I was 3-bet bluffing with like 10-7 suited and ace 9 off. I can't remember some of the other hands, but like, when I have position and I suspect you're weak when you're ISO raising or coming in, I'm just going to stick it to you and see what happens, go post flop against you. Because like you said, you had that ace queen suit is such a beautiful hand, but most likely you're going to hit nothing on the flop. You're just going to have an ace and a queen overpair. If he bets 60% pot, you're going to be check folding quite often. So you could turn the tables on your opponents to do exactly what he did against you.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the video, you talk about a few ways to kind of target these spots by open raising in middle and late position versus passive players in late position, particularly in the blinds, sizing appropriately, which we're kind of talking about here as well, three betting from late position, and this notion that we like limpers, we like tables with limpers, and we just play smart, right? And they are going to be kind of harder to range. And that's one of the things, but those wider rangers, they're weaker too. So they may have a trade-off there with their predictability versus the actual strength of the range. And just targeting the right tables, which is, I think, an element that we kind of don't think about enough. Not every table is a profitable table.
I think about it all the time.
Oh, you're a freaking pro, Eric. That doesn't surprise me one bit.
If I sit on the table and nobody's limp around two rotations, and they're all opening reasonable sizes, I'll just find a new table.
Yeah.
I don't want to play against good play or decent players. I don't even want to play against decent players.
Yeah. It's not a sexy way to improve as a player, but it's a great way to improve your win rate, right? Like it's the poker is just not one of those games where you want to be playing against everyone at the table being better than you. That's actually not a good way to improve. Talk about strategy with people that are better than you, but play with your peers or ideally people that are a little worse than you. You're definitely going to have more fun. You're definitely going to make more money. So yeah, and part of that's not every table is a good table, and not even on the good tables, not every seat's a good seat either. And everyone here knows about not having aggressive players to your left. If there's one rule, that's really what you want to avoid, just having those aggressive, savvy players to your left.
Hey, Eric, let me ask you a quick question. So you said that you have well-defined ranges that you follow pre-flop, right? When you suspected that this guy, especially after the second time three-betting you, right? When you suspect that this guy has me targeted, he's going to be three-betting me, he's trying to exploit me, how do you adjust your ranges, if you do?
I try to avoid the small sample size jump to conclusion. I know a lot of people like playing the meta game, but I've found when I've done that in the past, I'm like, oh, he's targeting me. Sometimes people get aces and ace king and kings 3 times in a row. So I try not to overdo that. I will adjust. The one thing I have been adjusting is when people overcall. So like, for example, small blind, I have a 3-bet or fold from the small blind, but if I see a couple overfolds and I'm like, okay, I can, or overcalls, then I say, okay, I can overcall with my suited ace. So I'm looking for things that can really play multi-way. Sometimes if I don't think I have a lot of fold equity, I'll shave the bottom part of my range, because I think that the bottom part of your range, some of the equity it has is from fold equity, but if people aren't folding, then like ace eight offsuit from the cutoff is a open when raised to, but if people in the blinds aren't folding, then maybe I'll cut that out of my range. And then so those are some of the adjustments. And then some of the adjustments are like, you see a 3-bet and then should I cold 4-bet or should I so those aren't on the charts, and so those are definitely, you have to it requires me to adjust in game kind of by the situation.
Good. Okay. So you are capable of decreasing those ranges or 4-betting as necessary, not as necessary, but as you see will work exploitatively.
Yes.
Cool. Good. Perfect.
Yeah, and Sky, how do you, because I know you play, I grew up playing cash too, and it's very much an opponent dependent game. Like, so how you adjust to play certain spots against certain opponents is very important. When it comes to applying the ways to kind of change our ranges and stuff like that, is how do you recommend recreational players like us think about, okay, so we know this guy is 3-betting us too much. what do we actually do differently there to combat that?
The two things, one of them Eric mentioned, definitely cutting off the bottom part of your range, because as I've said before, 3-bets are the bane of 2-bets. Like in your database, for anybody who has Poker Tracker 4, if you look up or if you filter for making the pre-flop 3-bet, you're probably going to have a positive win rate, positive 300, 400, something like that. When you 2-bet and then call the 3-bet and filter for that, you're going to see you're going to be negative 200, negative 350, something like that. So when somebody's exploiting you with 3-bets, the worst thing you could do is continue to open all of those hands, like the king queen off, the ace 8 off suit, the 7-6 suited, things that you're just going to auto fold versus a 3-bet, because he already knows that you're folding. When you open up those super weak hands, you're just asking him, you're giving him the opportunity to 3-bet against you, 3-bet bluff against you again. So that's the first step. Cut off the bottom hands. And you could do something drastic if you really think this guy has you pegged. Even after just 2 instances of 3-betting you, you just get the feeling, you just know this type of player. You've seen, even on Ignition, you've seen them do stuff like this before. Lop off every hand from your open raising range that you're going to fold versus a 3-bet. Just get them out of there. It's okay to play tight. I mean, you're on Ignition. They're not going to know you from today to tomorrow who you are, right? So just get rid of all of them. Only open raise with hands that you're willing to 4-bet or to call if you really think somebody has you pegged. The other thing to do is increase your sizing. So if you're normally a 2.5 big blind open raiser, make it 3, make it 3.5. Normally 3, make it 3.5. Make it a little bit more costly for them to 3-bet bluff you. So those are the 2 adjustments. And then beyond that, as you gain experience, you'll figure out what like works for you, what you like doing. Maybe you hate decreasing your ranges because you know you want to play these hands and those players in the blinds are great targets. So I'm going to keep playing my ranges. Well, if you want to avoid his 3-bets, then the only other option is to increase that sizing to make it more costly on him. And then the last adjustment that I would recommend is probably increasing your 4-bet range. That's the last thing right there. If the other 2 things don't really work out, or like if you just want to get more aggression and throw aggression back in his face, right? You could just start doing that too, but that's the third adjustment.
Chris, you had a question about notes, I think.
Yeah, Scott, I mean, speaking of sort of exploits, and I was watching your video and was kind of admiring the way you were taking notes on players. Like you would just sort of like have a quick note that was like capable of folding to min bet after bluffing or something like that. And like I noticed that when I'm taking notes, it's like this player donk bet into an 8-7 deuce flop with 30 big blinds effective, and ultimately then my notes start to be, like this thing that sort of becomes unusable. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, the art of taking notes on players and what are the important things to sort of gather and what are sort of maybe less important.
Less important are those super detailed notes, like you said, drawing out the board, whatever, right? Take notes on, so there's two ways that I do notes. Number one is I take note of a play that highlights a tendency, like the one that you had just mentioned, capable of folding to a min raise after a small c-bet, like something like that. And that'll be as small as it'll be. I don't need to say that it was an ace high board or just whatever, right? Just a small c-bet. And small c-bet would be like something less than half pot. So he could have made it 2 big blinds, 1/4 pot, 1/3 pot, whatever it was. But that basic tendency right there will tell me a little bit about him. And I can now, maybe min raise bluff a little bit more often on the flop, or not raise as a bluff, or I'm sorry, not raise when I have a value hand, just call to get value from him later on because he folds so often. The second type of note, and so that first note is very short, like as short as I can make it, just to remind myself of his tendencies. The second note, and I'll type this all in caps, and it's anything that I type in caps on a player note is directions to me. So I might say, bluff him on every flop, all in caps. And so that's just the simplest way to tell myself in the future to do this against him.
I like that.
Love it.
Yeah, because I also struggle with like how much detail to put in the notes and then how much to sort of extrapolate into the abstract, because I don't want to then make bad assumptions about it later because I got too far from the details. But as Chris says, you can't be that granular when you're writing all that stuff down. I haven't done that.
I'm sorry, one more thing to go with that. if I see somebody making a play and I make a note on it, I'll put an exclamation mark after that note if I see them do it multiple times. So if he donk bets one big blind and then folds, and I've seen him do it 3 times, I'll say donk bet fold on flop, exclamation, exclamation. So the note is 1 time, 2 exclamations is 3 times total. And then afterwards, just to reinforce the idea, I might say, all in caps, raise every min donk bet, something like that.
I've been using that exclamation point notion for a while. That was a great one I picked up from one of your videos a long time ago. I haven't used the all caps direction to myself though, but I really like that idea where one in the lower case, you're capturing information, and then in the upper case, you're kind of giving yourself direction. That's a great way to use that field. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Another thing that I do is I'll put question marks in there too. It's basically telling me a note to myself, this guy maybe does this. I just saw it once. I'm not sure that this is a trend yet, but I'm going to be watching for it.
Totally. And so you see that question mark. And if he does that again, now you know this is a tendency he has. You're right, Keith.
That gets turned into an exclamation point.
There you go.
And that's why it's so important that we track that stuff. We make those comments in Poker Tracker and not in the site software too. If people are watching this along at home and they're not using Poker Tracker, it's just a great reason to use Poker Tracker, among other reasons. If you put it in the site software, like in the PokerStars player notes editor, for instance, it'll still be there when you're playing against that player later, but you don't get that information when you're studying, when you're reviewing the hands, when you're breaking this player down in the lab and creating exploits against them. So put it in the Poker Tracker notes, and then you've got all that information in the same place.
Yeah. And another point, just to go along with that, Carbon Poker. I don't know if anybody here plays on Carbon, but they're the merge network. Last week, they had a whole site update, and any player notes that you had were erased after their update. So if you were utilizing that for your notes, you're screwed. You lost them all. So Poker Tracker 4 is the place to take notes.
Or even I remember when go ahead.
Is there a way to quickly open up the Poker Tracker 4 notes? Because I've been trying to do that, and then I'm trying to use my mouse to click the little button to open it up, and then and then the table will go right over the notes, and then I'm trying to so I'm just wondering, is there a better way to open those notes?
I wish there was, like hitting the F5 key or something, but not that I know of. But I do know that when you open up the player notes, at the bottom of your if you're on a Windows computer, I guess you have all the different tabs. A little Poker Tracker for a new additional symbol pops up because you have that new window open. So if you hit the note icon, window opens, but now actions on the table covers it. Go down to your taskbar, click that, and then type it in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that should be helpful. Cool. Thanks.
And I don't know if it's maybe I haven't used a lot of the multi-tabling software out there, but like Table Ninja or something else might also have a way of kind of having a different window space available for those kind of things. I'm not sure. Chris Jones says in the chat, second monitor is really helpful too. And I can't agree with that enough. Just having one where it's the actual playing surfaces, the tables are on one, and then the other ones like the lobby and the notes, and probably not much else because we're not playing distracted poker, right, folks? You don't have Twitter or Facebook up there, you're not watching the game or whatever. But it is nice to have that. Like I always playing monitor and then like information monitor, and that helps me keep that kind of stuff straight too.
I've gotten in the habit of dragging that note window over to one of the other monitors as soon as I open it, because it'll be my turn and all of a sudden it's buried and now I'm lost and now I'm panicking. And so
that's nice. I've never actually tried that. I'll give that a shot. I like it.
So another thing about notes that I was curious about. So Sky, you talk about the tick sheet a lot. And so Sky talks about having different kind of ways of playing. Sometimes you're playing like a volume session. Sometimes you're playing like a review session. Sometimes you're really just creating game tape. Sometimes it's a focus session where you're working on one particular concept. And I think it's important to have that kind of variety because you need to be able to practice the different parts with the different parts of your brain too. In the focus sessions, Sky, that's where we see sort of the tick box, the tick sheet, more than anything else. And you call them focus sections because you're really just focusing on one thing, right? And so what are some examples? Like in this exercise, we were tracking the bread and butter spots. What are some other just examples of things that recreational players like us might consider kind of tracking with the tick box? to sort of train our brain to pay attention to those kind of factors? What are your most common tick boxes or tick sheets?
Yeah, the most common ones would be, well, the bread and butter is great. There are some bet size tick sheets that I like to use, pre-flop or post-flop. Now, a lot of players are stuck. Let's talk about post-flop. Players are stuck on making that 50%. They just click the half pot button and bet every single time, right? Well, what I would do, if you have like a 50% pot, a 2/3, a 3/4, and a full pot, you have a 4-column tick sheet. Write down 50%, 66, 75. And then before you make your bet, look at your sheet or just think in your head, which is the best play? Because some of us, like I said, are just so stuck on half pot every time, half pot. We just don't think about it. When you have that tick sheet and you're forced to make a tick under your bet size, now you're just giving yourself a little bit extra time and space to think about what is the best size, which size will get me the most value, which size will maximize my fold equity at any given time. And so that's a great one to force yourself to use different sizes. Now, the other one would be for 3 bets or another great, what is it? Another great tick sheet is to get yourself, like a lot of players, they don't 3-bet enough. They're just a very honest 3-better. All they do is value 3-bet. So what you want to do is have bluff 3-bet as one column, value 3-bet for the other, and call for a third column right there. Because oftentimes we call, but then we don't think to ourselves, would a bluff 3-bet, would it have been better? So every time before you click the call button with your mouse, put a tick mark under call. And then, because when you pick up your pen and reach to make that tick mark, right next to it, you're going to see bluff 3-bet column. And hopefully that'll trigger something in you that, wait a second, I'm about to call, but I have an ace-5 suited. Sky says ace-5 suited is a good 3-bet bluffing hand. Should I 3-bet bluff? And then that might trigger you to pull the trigger on the 3-bet bluff. You make a tick mark under that instead, and then make your bluff. Whether it's successful or not, who knows? But at least you gave it a little bit more thought because you took the time. Your hand was off your mouse too, by the way, when you have to hold a pen and then make a tick mark. And that's a great way to give yourself a little bit of brain space to make that. To think about your choices. So those are 2 of my favorite tick sheets I like to give my students.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of like prompting yourself to reconsider your action, right? That's something that I think we all need to do more. And Sky talks about this also in his like making game tape or like talking out your decisions as you're making your actions. And we do this all the time at rec.poker too. If you have to explain your decisions, even just to yourself, you will eliminate some stupid, lazy errors that you would make otherwise. I guarantee it, let alone if I told you that like you had to send me a tape of you playing every week, you would not want to make any stupid mistakes on that tape. And so all you have to do is just hold yourself accountable to yourself the same way that you would towards a trusted friend. And, give yourself the benefit of actually prompting yourself, not just working on autopilot. So the tick sheet's a great way to do that. Another great way is the sticky note. And Sky talks about this as well. I used to golf more than I played poker. And so for me, I think about it as swing thoughts, which are like, what are the few thoughts I want to have in my head as I'm doing this? Because I don't want to overload myself, but I don't want to be completely empty-headed either. So Sky, do you play sometimes with a sticky note up with some thoughts that you want to focus on in that session? How often do you rotate through those thoughts, and how often is it just kind of like the same big 3 or something like that?
Whatever my current, so when I'm playing, going through my database, and I might find that I have some kind of an issue, whatever it is. Mentioning earlier, c-betting at just half pot every time. I might put a sticky note to myself saying, consider your bet size before c-betting post-flop, something simple like that. And so occasionally, if I find that I need help, I need to force myself to focus on something, that will be on that day's session tick sheet. But quite often, and I have it right here, this is my number 1 go-to tick sheet. I don't know if you, oh, there we go. What are they doing this with?
Nice.
That's what I call poker's ultimate question, because anytime your opponent makes an action, you open raise, they call out of the big blind. What are they doing this with? You answer that question, that gives you their range of hands. Not gives you, but I mean, you start thinking about their range of hands. They check, you c-bet, they check raise. Oh, what are they doing this with? And now you're thinking about their pre-flop range on this board. Is he check raise bluffing? What could he be bluffing? What could he be value raising me with? And that's what I call poker's ultimate question. And that's a tick sheet I always have on my computer. Or not a tick sheet, a sticky note. And I absolutely love it. Now, I gave my student, I don't have an example of it, but I had a one-on-one session with a student today, and he has been suffering recently from button clicking too quickly without thinking anything. Like, oh, I have 6-7 suited, I call. He c-bet, I have ace high, I call. Whatever the situation is, not thinking through his decisions. So I told him to get like a nice bright colored, post-it note. He plays 2 tables at a time. Wherever your tables are on your screen, every time it's your action, those 3 buttons pop up in the same spot on those 2 tables. So underneath, underneath on both tables, put the sticky note, attach it to the computer, like directly under the button. It's nice and bright. So you're hopefully your eye's gonna be drawn to it before you click call. And the simple note to yourself is, which is most positive EV? And with the idea that before he clicks call, his job is, oh, there's that question, which is most positive EV? Is it folding, calling, or raising? And then he makes his chosen play. And then so sometimes like having a post-it note just on your monitor around the edges doesn't help when your tables are right there and you're just focused on the action. But when you stick it directly to your screen, you might use that sticky note a little bit more often.
Yeah, it might like force itself into your brain a little more, right? And I think we need that, because it's very comfortable to just kind of allow ourselves to continue doing what we expect to do. And the fact is, poker is full of new spots, and they're not new spots, but for us, every street is a new decision. The ranges have changed. The board has changed. It's time to reevaluate and consider what is the best choice to make here, not just what is usually what I do here. Yeah, so I think that's a great thought.
Yeah, I've been using the hand off the mouse thing, because I've been like that snap click, like, oh, he's full of call. I'm like, if you thought about it, he's not bluffing on that board. But I didn't think about it, so I do like take my hand off that mouse.
Yeah.
Good.
The only note I have is, on the river, they always have it.
That is a good note. That is a good note. Yes.
Yeah, I had one up that was just the one that was always on my monitor was, play your actual stack in real time. Don't worry about what you had the hand before. Don't worry about what you want to have on the next hand. Just think about your stack. I always needed to remind myself that actually my chip stack and the stacks of the other players at the table is probably the most important factor to be considering right now. Yeah, so that's a good one. And I like the way of like forcing our brains to think about that kind of stuff, because it takes a while to train it. So there's some comments in the chat here about notes and tags as well as they're playing. I love using tags. I think that's a really great way. I use them on my own hands. I use them on other people's hands, and I group them by the kind of error that was made. So, raising error, folding error, calling error, sizing error. Those are the 4 that I kind of tend to put out, whether it's me or someone else making the mistake. Yeah, Chris, you've got some great stuff in here. Can you just share a little bit with the group about how you use those different notes and colors?
Well, so I use notes and colors for other players, and I use the tags to sort of mark my own play for review. And yeah, I just use some of those simple, that kind of lighten the mood when you've made a terrible play. So I use the fish for when I think I've really made a big error. I use the dice when I feel like I think I still made an error, but I got lucky. And I wanna mark those because I want to be aware of them, because like it's so easy to move past the time when you like shove with ace 9 or something and they have ace king and you hit a 9 and it's like, oh cool, I doubled up, but like you might have made a big spot. So I like that one a lot. I review those a lot.
Is that a Gluck or a Fluck, Chris? I don't remember.
That's a Gluck.
That's a Gluck? Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
The Fluck is when the opposite.
Okay.
Just like that. I use the bomb when I think I've played tilty. And so like those are other ones I can go back and kind of think about what was going on, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great way. And also one of the things that Poker Tracker is really good at is analyzing data on different layers, like using different factors. So, but it's not perfect. So if you want to run a particular filter and say tag every hand that shows up in that filter and then run a completely different filter that looks for something else, you can then just see within that set all the hands that had that tag from the previous filter. And now it's a way to kind of find your little subset of that little magical piece of information there. So it's good for batching as well. Sky, how do you use tags in real time and to study? Because I know you get a lot of information about that.
Just like Chris says, I'll tag any hands with like just a review tag, or if I have some specific thing that I'm working on, I'll create a new tag within Poker Tracker 4 so I can tag it and review it later on. But the big thing I use is color coding my opponents with the HUD. As soon as somebody limps into the pot, I don't care if it's the very first hand, I give them the green tag, meaning a fish. Especially on ignition, if somebody is brand new to the table and they buy in for 40 big blinds, they're a fish. They might be a strong short stack player, but they're probably a fish. They limp in, they're a fish. I've seen 2-3 bets in a row. I know it's a short sample, like Eric said, that could be pocket aces and kings 2 hands in a row, but most likely they're a pretty aggressive player. So I'll give them the orange tag right away. And I love doing the color coding on my opponent's HUDs because I don't even have to look at the HUD stats. I see that, oh, he's orange, he's a loose aggressive player. I can now start using my loose aggressive exploits. Just that generally work against loose aggressive players, and same thing against fish. And if I tag somebody with yellow because they're folding a lot and they're like a tight aggressive player, then I can use my tight aggressive general exploits until I find out after my sample size, I play more hands. Maybe he's not, he doesn't have the tendencies I can exploit. Then I'll start adjusting. But as soon as I pick up on a player type, I color code and I start exploiting right away. The sooner the better.
So I want to take it back to the bread and butter stuff a little bit, but if anyone else has any other questions about Poker Tracker or tags and notes and all that stuff, just jump in there. So we talked about sort of how to target the bread and butter spots. And then you also go over in your video, Sky, how to kind of avoid these non-bread and butter spots. And so just limping, just don't limp. ISO instead, don't over limp, don't open limp, just take the limping part out of your game. So if you're playing, you're raising. You know, like that's a good way to be thinking about it too. And it's not that it's going to be the case every time. It's just that you want to be encouraging your brain to consider that action instead. Calling less frequently, period. And just don't give them the bread and butter spots like we were talking about. So, you know, part of that's going to be just playing in position more, calling less out of the blinds, not limping at all, probably upping your sizing in the games that require that, right? And then I know it's pretty simple, but Sky, am I missing anything there? Or is it just play aggressively? But I guess one other point you mentioned is don't manufacture these spots with hands that aren't good candidates for it. So you don't actually have to, just because someone opens in front of you and you want to play bread and butter, you don't have to 3-bet them with 10-4 offsuit. So how do you, Sky, how do you recommend that if we are more passive players because we're recreational, how do we actually ramp up? Is it just hand by hand, we just think about it and decide to be more aggressive, or should we be choosing certain types of hands to be more aggressive with and just know that when that comes up, we're going to be more thoughtful about that? How do we take that first step to increasing this?
The first step is what you said a second ago, no more limping, right? A lot of players that are too passive and they call a ton, they also limp a ton. Get that limping out of your vocabulary or out of your button clicking actions, right? I just created a video on my YouTube channel where I showed my student who did 96 limps in his last 10,000 hands. But every time he limps, on average, he loses 1.7 big blinds on average. So you're putting one big blind to get into the pot, but in the end, after 96 hands, he lost 1.7 each time. It's really not worth it. Limping, it doesn't give you any fold equity. You have a really crappy range. Everybody's just going to bet when you check to them post flop. So get that out of there. The second thing that I would do is play focus sessions of just 1 or 2 tables. Some of us love to play 4 and 6 tables because we want to see a lot of hands. We want to call, we want to hit flops, we want to catch flushes and stuff. Play a focus session, just 1 or 2 tables, where your goal is to get aggressive at every good opportunity. So when it's folded to you in the hijack, let's say, what are you thinking about before open raising? Well, it's your cards, specifically your position, what the remaining players, if you're in the hijack, cutoff, button, small blind, big blind, how are they likely going to react? Are any of these players good targets? Are any of these players going to 3-bet you and make you fold? So you want to force yourself at every, I don't care if you have 9 deuce offsuit, right? It's folded to you in the hijack. Before you click fold, and you're going to click fold because it's just a 9 deuce, give it some thought. If I had a 10 jack suited, if I had ace 8 offsuit, would I open raise here? And then maybe even think in your head, what is the worst hand I would open raise? Oh, 6-7. It's not as strong. It's 7 high than 9 deuce, but it's a way more playable post flop hand. So I would open raise 6-7. So that's the first thing that you do before you fold your hand. Consider what you would raise with. Now, when it comes to 3-betting, that's really tough because a lot of players, like I said earlier, are honestly only 3-bet with really strong hands. But every time before you click call or before you click fold, when somebody else open raises, you have that 3-betting opportunity, think in your head the same thing. Okay, I'm not going to 3-bet because I only have 9 deuce offsuit. I'm not going to call either. But what would I 3-bet with here? Oh, jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace, king, ace, queen, whatever that might be at the time, right? Force yourself to continually think about it. And the last part is force yourself to pull the trigger when you think it's a good time to do it. A lot of us, like, you'll hear me say, okay, somebody open raises in the cutoff. A really good hand to 3-bet bluff is on the button with ace 5 suited. His raise first in is over 20%. He folds to 3-bet 73% of the time. And he's flop honest as well. He folds on the flop 65%. That's a great spot to be 3-betting. In case he calls you, he folds a lot on the flop. You have an ace blocker. That means he has less pocket aces, ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack in his range as well. Everything is going for you right there. You have to force yourself to make those aggressive plays. And when you do it more often, you guys know anything. You played sports, right? I mean, you learn to dribble a basketball by getting out there on the court and dribbling a basketball over and over for hours each season, right? That's the only way you're going to become aggressive for 2-bets, ISO raises, 3-bet steals, 3-bet re-steals, all that stuff is by recognizing that this is a good opportunity and then pulling the trigger.
And it's an iterative process too, because it takes both playing and practicing, but then also studying and preparing and reviewing. And then next time you're playing, practicing even better. And so while you're playing, start thinking about, okay, where am I feeling uncomfortable? And why am I feeling like I don't want to pull the trigger here? Or what are the kind of hands that, because the best thing that's come out of this whole session is what Sky said just there. Don't, every time you're considering one of those actions, think, what would I do with my entire range here? What are the hands that I would raise with? What are the hands that I would call with? And then that's going to help you every time you do that. That's going to help you practice. Next time you're in that spot with one of those hands, you're going to be thinking, oh, okay, well, I know I'm going to be raising with like these hands. So now it's time to think about, is this opponent the right one for that? What sizing do I want to use here? And so part of that, you're going to have spent a little time in the lab thinking about what are the good candidates that I want to use when I'm playing, when this spot comes up. Is this one of those hands or not? But then you're going to go back to the lab afterwards. And another thing that's great about Poker Tracker is that it will not lie to you about your frequencies, your win rates, what the hands you're choosing to do things. We are all unreliable narrators when it comes to our own action and our own story and our own success. But Poker Tracker shines the light, and it will tell you, no, you're doing it exactly this often with exactly these hands. And that's a big part of getting better as well. So Sky, you put together some filters here, I know, and this was the first month we've done this study session, so I don't know if the people in the group have had time to kind of go through the exercise and put the filters together. Did anybody, just a show of hands, did anybody get a chance to put the filters together? Jim Gibson did. I did. I ran a couple. Looks like Rob did as well. And I sometimes I even find some of the filters and reports a little intimidating because there's so many different ways we could cut up that data. But it's really helpful to have some of these, to watch you go through it and to sort of see how the different elements are put together. One of our members, Eric Anderson, also does a lot of great work with filters and reports. So he couldn't be here today, but I'm sure he's going to enjoy this afterwards.
I think Eric's a member of the Poker Forge too, if it's the same Eric Anderson.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah,
That wouldn't
yeah.
surprise me. He's right up your alley.
Yeah.
He's right up your alley.
It's like Jim. Hey, Jim Gibson. Good to see you, buddy. You're one of my newest Poker Forge members as well.
Yeah, I've got the fire hose straight in my mouth, and I'm trying to piece them down and go through some things. But just glancing at, you were talking about the filters, just glancing at those filters that you put in, I'm seeing way too much red. So I've got a lot of stuff to work on. So.
For sure. And one thing Jim had mentioned that it can be overwhelming, all this data, and maybe you suffer from, not you, but people could suffer from a paralysis by analysis with too much data. Well, just the more you do it, the more you run filters and look through the data, the more you'll just become used to it, and you'll start to find useful information in it. So you might be overwhelmed at first. And in that bread and butter filters video, I can't remember 3 or 4 filters I run in there, maybe even more. Just do one at a time, and then spend one study session running one filter and looking through hands for 20 minutes. Tomorrow, another filter, looking for hands again for a little bit of time, and you'll get used to it. And that paralysis by analysis will go away, and it's going to open your eyes. You're going to run a filter, and you're going to come up with hands, and you're going to think, oh, but what about this other situation? And then you're going to devise and create the filter for yourself. And you're going to be teaching yourself by just your own thoughts and going through your database in your own interesting new kind of ways,
And I'm actually going to I'm just putting the link in the chat here. If anybody wants to join Sky at the Poker Forge, you can click on that link there and check out everything he's got going for him. There's also a great sneak peek video in the forums here that you can take a look sort of behind the scenes at what's going on there.
Cool. Hey, Jim, real quick, I have a question. So in the very first video called Play More Bread and Butter, right? There's the action step at the end. And I tell you guys, to play a few sessions using the tick sheet. And I just want to know who actually took action with that action step and did at least one study session or a play session that way.
I know Eric did. Any other hands? Mea culpa. I haven't even played a hand of poker in about a month. I'm way behind. But I can't emphasize this enough. A lot of Sky stuff: strategy, take action, review. And this is that iterative process that I think if you're only doing a part of this, you're not going to get the most out of it. So we really need to lean into this active learning. We need to not only study the abstract concepts, we need to learn how to apply them. We need to train our brain to start doing it at the table, whether it's online or live. It's the same process of ranging opponents, making good decisions, thinking about the relevant factors, and then later reviewing it and analyzing it with the excellent data that's available to you. So, and I know we're all recreational players. We have jobs. We've got busy lives. It's hard to kind of put time together to study and to play and to take it seriously, but you're really not getting the most out of this stuff unless you take some steps to internalize it. You can listen to all the podcasts, watch all the videos, whatever you want. You're just not going to capture it in a way that you find helpful at the tables unless you're really working on it through. And so Sky, we haven't actually, I don't think we've picked the video for next month, but it'll be the same kind of concept of strategy, taking action, and review. So I think one challenge would be now that we've kind of finding our groove with this program a little bit, on the 3rd Saturday of October, I'm actually going to be, I think I'm playing something at the Venetian that day. So I'll be co-hosting from the floor, and we'll try and have, I'm certainly going to take some action steps out of that, and I hope everybody else does, to get a chance to kind of work on this one part of your game between now and that 3rd Saturday in October. Okay, so any other questions here?
One thing I've always noticed about Sky and his approach to training and whatnot, is so different than all the other podcasts or the training sites, is his action steps. He talks about a concept and then he gives you the tools to go and actually use those steps while you're playing to ingrain that concept into your head while you're playing. And Sky has been very unique in that, and anything that I've been following or reading or listening to. So I really commend him on that, because I think that's a very hugely important part of the whole thing.
Thank you, Rob.
And you know what? I know everyone who's in this group, personal challenge to each of you now. I'd like you to, once this video comes out, it'll drop on the first Saturday of October. So you'll have a couple weeks to watch it and to play a little. Post in the forums. I want to see a screenshot of a filter that you've set up, or I want to see a photo of you playing with a tick sheet next to your computer or something like that. I want everyone in this group to post one thing to the forum for this group saying this is what they did to take action. And we're not going to do that for every group, but in the Sky Matsuhashi Poker Forge group, taking action is going to be part of our education and our training around here. So you're welcome to join us next month, even if you don't. But please do post something up in there. And I think you'll get a lot more out of it if you go to that step of taking that concrete action. Any other thoughts for Sky before we wrap it up? I want to honor his time. We said we'd take about an hour for these. We've got a few minutes left. All right. Well, the link is there. I do encourage everyone to go check it out. The Poker Forge is a great place. And as Rob points out, there's lots of different training sites out there, and different people fit better with different kinds of learning. But this kind of incremental, iterative, Sky's going to teach you how to learn. He's going to teach you how to learn really important foundational stuff that even those of us that feel like we sort of have a lot of poker figured out, we're going to be able to find some ways to improve. And it's not always about raising your ceiling either. Sometimes it's about raising your floor. And if we can just eliminate some of the bigger mistakes that we're making at the table. Here, speaking of Eric Anderson, he's just coming in a little late, unfortunately. If you can just eliminate some of the worst mistakes that you're making, that's as valuable as making your A game a little bit better, to be honest with you. Eric Anderson, I summoned you. I was hoping we might see you today because I know you're a big Poker Tracker 4 fan. And Sky says I think he thinks you might be a Poker Forge member already. And I said, I know he is. Eric's the man when it comes to that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, we're just wrapping up today, Eric, but try 1 hour earlier next month and we will get you in here. We'll get you in here. All right. Well, I'd like to thank Sky Matsuhashi and of course, everybody else who showed up today. We had a great turnout, about 12 or 13 folks. Maybe we'll get a few more next month. You never know. And do take those action steps. So I'll put a post in the forums when the video drops. It'll be on the first Saturday in October. And yeah, I would say get your teeth into that and take some steps. All right. Well, thanks, Guy. And thanks everybody else. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Thank you.